you know, it's not like this is unknown. It's not like this whole philosophy of Canadian justice, and particularly the criminal justice system and the treatment of Aboriginal people is new. There's been numerous reports done on it. Provincially, there's been inquiries, inquests. I'm quoting something quite old, it's from 1988. It's called Locking Up Natives. Put at its baldest, there's an equation of being drunk, Indian, and in prison. Like many stereotypes, this one has a dark underside. It reflects a view of Native people as uncivilized and without a coherent social or moral order. The stereotype prevents us from seeing Native people as equals. And I think your profile, Jules, that the Canadian Correctional Service laid out exemplifies that. Only now it's 2011, not 1988. When do the stereotypes end? When does criminalization end towards Aboriginal people? Jules went through some of these statistics, so I'm going to kind of go through these a little quicker. I do have the percentages from 2007 and 8 of the overrepresentation of Aboriginal people. And as Jules pointed out, in Canada, we're about 3% of the population. However, we're 18% of inmates in federal prison and 25% of inmates in provincial and territorial jails. In certain provinces like Manitoba and Saskatchewan, an Aboriginal First Nations man born in 1980 has a higher likelihood of being incarcerated than graduating high school. Okay, this is 2011. 1 in 5 inmates in federal custody are Aboriginal. Nationally, 1/4 of the inmates in provincial custody are Aboriginal people. Criminalization, particularly of women, 1 in 3, and I know Jules already said this, but 1 in 3 women federally incarcerated are Aboriginal. So in terms of marginalized or racial groups, Aboriginal women specifically are the most overrepresented within the federal government correctional system. And Bill C-10 is only going to increase that with minimum mandatories. Because when you get convicted of one crime, it goes on your record. The next time you come before the court, guess what happens? They look at that record if you're convicted again. And it's an incremental increase. And there's been such a progress in some ways around the Gladue case and the evolution of 718(2)E that is going to have to take a big jump back. Now, in this omnibus, in this legislation, there's no revocation of 718(2)E. They're not saying it no longer applies, but they're certainly getting around the case laws that's developed to apply to Aboriginal people. And by the way, that provision applies to every offender or person with the goal of reducing the rate of incarceration. And it's worked for every other group, not for Aboriginal people. That's going to change for everyone under Bill C-10. There will be more incarceration with the stipulation of tougher, stiffer sentences for young people. It sets young people up to fail and become part of systematic incarceration or institutionalization throughout their lives. Good, and I'm not going to go into this one because, again, Jules touched on this. This was Michelle Mann's report. So the correctional investigator explained that once an Aboriginal person is put into custody, once they're federally sentenced, they have a harder time getting out at their release date. The lower parole is granted, like less parole is granted. There's a segregation population, and Audrey actually touched on this. She called it the kangaroo court. You get thrown in the hole. If something's not going right on your range, you get thrown in the hole. Okay, and this will happen more frequently to Aboriginal women than other women, particularly when it's fights around race-based issues. More likely to be released at statutory release or warrant expiry. That means you have to serve your entire time. Okay, more likely to be classified as higher risk and higher need in categories such as employment, community, reintegration, and family supports. So what are the real big issues? The impact the omnibus legislation will likely have on the already representation of criminalization of Aboriginal people is massive. Right now, a lot of academics are talking about what is the trajectory of criminality. They're using all these fancy terms. Actually, Aboriginal people are classified as having criminalistic behaviors by virtue of being Aboriginal. You have a higher likelihood of engaging in criminal activity. It's bizarre. And the concept and the talks that you hear at academics and actually Crown prosecutors making, even to the Supreme Court of Canada, is, part of the reason Aboriginal people are overrepresented is because they have that young population. because they're in that age range of, the 15 to 25 or 30, and that's where crime happens. This misconception that the government will put out there for votes, because the Conservatives will tell you that this was a strong mandate they reached, and this was the biggest part of their platform, and they promised to pass this legislation in 100 days of sitting, and they'll tell you that they had a strong mandate. What was the percentage? Anyone off the top of their head know the percentage of people who voted? Because I don't think it's a strong mandate. So I saw someone's hand go up. What is it? 52% of eligible voters voted, and the Conservatives got in on just a slight majority. So that's a strong mandate to put in this legislation.